Bar Kokhba revolt is a fascinating story. Unlike the Second Temple period, where the Jews were not unified and certain cities fought the Romans, other cities surrendered to the Romans, we had civil war and infighting, we see that Simon Bar Koziva, the man who organized this revolt, who led it, who was later renamed Bar Kokhba, son of a star, as an allusion to his messianic potential, he was able to actually unify the Jewish people. And we have descriptions from Jewish sources, but a lot from Roman sources, describing what an incredibly difficult revolt this was for the Romans to crush. It seems that Bar Kokhba was able to more or less rally the Jewish people around him, create a giant army. Now again, these were not professional soldiers like the Romans, 100,000 men. So great was the threat that the Romans were afraid to meet Bar Kokhba in open warfare. As a matter of fact, there's been much debate as to how big the revolt was. And many historians actually believe it was one of the greatest threats to the Roman Empire in the history of the Roman Empire. Estimates for how many legions had to be brought in to crush the revolt vary tremendously. But most people think it was up to 12 and possibly 14 legions of the Roman Empire. And since the Roman Empire only had about 24 legions in the entire Roman Empire, to have to bring in half the Roman army to crush Bar Kokhba, unbelievable. Now, of course, we know that the revolt ended in disaster. And eventually the Bar Kokhba revolt was crushed. And the Romans considered it such a great military victory that we now know from records that a huge number of medals and honors were given to Roman generals and fighters. So significant was this revolt. We also even believe that the Romans built a giant commemorative arch. It no longer stands, but we found a piece of the inscription similar to Titus's arch, built after the Second Temple was destroyed, to commemorate that victory of Rome over the Jewish people that led to the destruction of the Second Temple. It seems like the Romans built a humongous commemorative arch somewhere in Beit Shan up north in Israel. So we see that it was a true threat, something the Romans had to expend a tremendous amount of effort, manpower, and resources to crush. But one of the big lessons of the Bar Kokhba uprising is, even though it ended in disaster, the fact that the Jewish people were unified and were able to unite around one leader and go after an enemy who was the most powerful enemy in the world, and it took so much effort for that enemy to crush the Jewish people, it truly is a great lesson about how the Jewish people, if unified, are virtually an unstoppable force in human history.